make moves to the music. Ow!
Hello everyone, welcome to another Friday Flashback pay-per-view review here from the CC Network. I'm Fred, your ever-reliable host as always, and on this month's edition, as we're approaching the height of summer, it's appropriate to look at a non-SummerSlam event for once, because they are overdone at this time period, and I thought that the Great American Bash 2008 seemed to be a decent choice. This was requested by Mike Copeland, a loyal subscriber and friend of mine who isn't shy to voice his opinions on things if his Twitter is anything to go by. I hope that I do this event justice, because you said to me when you requested it that you really love this event. I wonder if our opinions will clash on this matter. Nonetheless, this event is significant for a few reasons. Firstly, it's the first post-Benoit tragedy event that I've covered on this Friday Flashback show. Secondly, it was the event that marked the debut of the Divas Championship, which we won on the night with a new champion. Thirdly, it was the last Great American Bash pay-per-view featuring the actual full title, as it was transitioned and shortened to the Bash a year later. And finally, this was the last TV14 pay-per-view done by WWE before PG came in. And it was because of one match in particular on this card that did it, and we'll get to that later. But in terms of storylines on this event, the seismic 2008 draft had come and gone the month before, and new rivalries had started to take shape, and with SummerSlam looming over on the horizon, this event had to set everything up. Now, could it do it with poise and composure, or will it end badly for all concerned? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's by analysing the living hell out of it. WWE Great American Bash 2008 was held on July 20th, 2008, in the Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York, with 14,216 people flocking in. Now, this venue has, of course, been a very popular one with WWE events over the years, as it saw the New York leg of WrestleMania 2, the first Saturday night's main event, SummerSlam 2002, which will be re-reviewed in November, of course, and the numerous Raw, SmackDown and ECW events that have passed through in WWE's touring cycle, as well as a few WCW Nitro tapings in the late 90s. All sounds pretty good, and this was the second to last pay-per-view to be held at this venue, with Fatal 4-Way 2 years later being its final bow in a pay-per-view pantheon that stretches back nearly 30 years, because of course they mentioned they're not going to be holding any more events at this venue last year, which is pretty sad, because I always liked the Nassau Coliseum in terms of its design and good retention of crowd dispersion. Nonetheless, American Bang's move to the music provided a bright, summery outlook for an event that on paper had a pretty solid card. Now let's see if it can deliver. To kick things off, we have a fatal 4-way match for the Tag Team Championships, pitting the incumbent champions Miz and John Morrison against some quite stellar competition, really. Jesse and Festus, Hawkins and Ryder, and Finlay and Hornswoggle. Was this really the best that SmackDown and ECW had at the time? Oh my word, this is horrible. Anyway, The Miz and John Morrison have been champions since November of 2007, defeating a variety of opponents along the way, holding the SmackDown Tag Championships in ECW for the majority of that period, which is surprising. After the two had talked down to multiple teams on their Dirt Show web series, they were placed in a fatal 4-way at the pay-per-view, and it seems pretty simple, right? There wasn't really much I could find that could substantiate this match's existence, which is quite irritating considering this is the one that opened the show. Anyway, surprisingly, it was La Familia's Hawkins and Ryder who came out on top, pinning Jesse to win their first and only Tag Team Championship after 10 minutes and 36 seconds. Now, in all fairness, looking at the teams on show, none of them scream excellent caliber opposition. I've already made that apparent. In fact, looking at the Miz and Morrison's opposition during their title reign, when you look at the pro fighting database, they barely fought anyone of real note outside of the Hardy Boys, making their reign feel quite hollow, despite what great chemistry and fan reception they brought to the table. The match itself here did have its moments, with Festus running roughshod early on, Finlay playing the face in peril while Hornswoggle wanted to pick a fight with just about anybody, even pulling off a nice suicide dive in the process. It was a fast match, only broken minimally by some ground action to wear Finlay down and showcase his fighting spirit, which was lovely. Outside of one great catapult bunch crossbody double team, Miz and Morrison were fairly absent here, which, as defending champions, really does say a lot, which may have contributed to their loss in good measure. The finish was well executed and gave an up-and-coming team their chance to shine, but overall, a lack of interest from the crowd and just psychology throughout, combined with its long runtime, didn't help proceedings. I really didn't care for this match, and while it did have me sitting up occasionally, it didn't entertain enough to warrant too much more than the rating I'm going to give it, which is a bare 1-star rating. I could have been cruel and given it 3/4 of a star, but what little I got was so good, I thought, you know what? It's done its job. I don't have to do much else. And especially seeing Hawkins kick Hornswoggle out of the corner, that was lovely. It was definitely showed, really. When I look at this match and the quality on show here, it was definitely a match that said that SmackDown and ECW's tag divisions were just awful. Then again, Raw's weren't that much better because they didn't even make the card. Nonetheless, 1 star is all I'll give, and let's move on to the next one. Next, we have another title match, this time for the United States Championship, pitting the champion Matt Hardy against the gold standard Shelton Benjamin. Now, Matt Hardy had won the title at Backlash, defeating longtime rival and former tag team partner and tag champion MVP to end his nearly year-long reign as champion. Now, subsequently, Matt was drafted to ECW with title in hand, and he successfully defeated Chavo Guerrero to retain the title at Night of Champions as part of the brand. Now, Benjamin was drafted to SmackDown in the WWE.com exclusive supplemental draft and defeated Hardy in a non-title match on SmackDown, setting up this encounter for the Great American Bash. Again, it sounds very simple. Benjamin successfully defeated Hardy to become the new champion in 10 minutes and 16 seconds. I will give Hardy and Benjamin some credit here. This match wasn't the most exciting, but it was a fine showcase of both men's athleticism and wrestling skill, with Benjamin's ground game and fast kicks being accentuated by Hardy's hard-hitting grapples and strikes. It allowed for a very even contest, with both men gaining offense as momentum swung consistently. Hardy was over as hell in this match, and the multiple near falls kept those fans on their toes, and the psychology of Benjamin working Hardy's back and head coming into play, along with an aforementioned mean streak that the commentators noted, made it all come together actually quite well. That being said, though, the match went a little too long for my liking, and due to that lack of crowd noise that came outside of the occasional pop for Hardy, it just made the match laboured and became quite a tired watch. Even with its good parts, it wasn't the all-out athletic contest expected and lived up to its billing of being a simple match that existed as a way of bringing the US title back to SmackDown from ECW. Now, I really hate matches like that. They're just put on the card for one little purpose, and it basically makes the match pointless, and there's no real feud to back up any psychology. The body psychology they did was great, but there wasn't anything else. It felt very flat, and when you combine that with a slow-paced match with occasional bits of fastness to it, and the crowd just not really getting into it, the match doesn't come across as very positive. But in regardless of that, I'll give it a 1.5 star rating. It was solid, but nothing spectacular, and honestly, with these two, I expected something much better than what I got, but I am somewhat satisfied, so I shouldn't complain too much. The third match of the night keeps the title bounce coming with the ECW Championship match, with Mark Henry defending against ECW original Tommy Dreamer. Now, Mark Henry brought the ECW Championship back to the brand following defeating of Raw's Kane at Night of Champions and proclaimed himself to be the saviour of the brand as a result. Now, Tommy Dreamer obviously would take offence to this and called him an embarrassment, challenging Henry for a title shot. Henry then just attacked Dreamer's protege Colin Delaney, instead highlighting that if Delaney beat him, yeah, Dreamer, you can have a title shot. And of course, Henry squashed Delaney quickly, but that didn't stop Dreamer's pursuit of the title as the following weeks went on. The two faced off in a non-title match, which went to a no contest after the guest ring announcer and all-out good guy Hall of Famer Tony Atlas turned heel and sided with Henry, causing both Henry and Dreamer to be counted out in the resulting melee. Due to this, General Manager Teddy Long granted the match at the Great American Bash, not before Dreamer smashed Henry's head with a frying pan, which he tried to bend in a test of strength, which then caused Henry to beat up Delaney as collateral for his teacher's brazen attempt to get one over on him. Now, with Henry showing his strength as the new champion, he couldn't possibly lose, right? Well, you would be correct, as the world's strongest champion defeated Dreamer to retain his title in a quite paltry 5 minutes and 30 seconds, thanks, surprisingly, to help from Colin Delaney, who turned heel, probably due to the fact that he didn't want to get beaten up by anyone because of Tommy's actions again, and he sent his teacher crashing and burning. Lo and behold, that was the best part of the entire match. Now, that should say a lot, to be honest. This match was horrible. It was a slow, plodding mess that rushed to its conclusion and didn't really give itself any time to build to that climactic twist ending. And while the fans were hot for Dreamer at the bell, because of course he comes from Yonkers, therefore they would go crazy for a local New York boy, they turned on the match as Henry dominated not too long afterwards with his methodical offense, with boring chants ringing out loudly from a New York crowd who wanted something with a little bit more flavour. And I will give credit to the heel turn from Delaney, as I've already mentioned, it was the best part of this match and a great piece of storytelling. Because, yeah, he would have been tired of Dreamer always causing him harm because of his very aggressive actions. I just wish, though, looking back, he wasn't released, 2 months after this? After SummerSlam, before SummerSlam, they had one quick match to blow it all off, and that was it. Delaney was gone afterwards. I would have liked to have seen more from it. In fact, it was a natural-born heel move, and it would have been great. Alas, it didn't happen, and that was how it goes. And with the heel turn being the only bright spark of this match, it gets a 0, which is too bad because many ECW Championship matches from this point got that much, or even just a tiny smidgen more. So this is what we're going to have to expect if I do any more 2007 through to about 2010 pay-per-views on this channel. Whew. It's going to be real irritating, but hey, at least I had a good heel turn, I gotta say. Next, we have a very personal rivalry rearing its head as Shawn Michaels takes on Chris Jericho. Now, the first few pieces of this elaborate jigsaw puzzle of a feud were assembled together at Backlash, with Jericho refereeing the emotional post-Flair retirement feud between Batista and the Heartbreak Kid, which Michaels won despite injuring his knee attempting the switch in music. Now, Jericho, being the referee, he kinda questioned the legitimacy of the injury and wouldn't stop hounding Michaels about it over the coming weeks, with Michaels admitting he'd faked it to allow Jericho to buy him some time to recover from the physical beating he took. And then, of course, because he's a bit of a dick, because he's Shawn Michaels, he delivered a switch in music to Jericho, because, like I've said, he can. They both then faced in a match at Judgment Day the next month where Michaels won. Now, following Michaels' defeat in a stretcher match at Batista at One Night Stand, Jericho attacked Michaels by throwing him headfirst into the Jeritron 5000 on an edition of the highlight reel, injuring his eye. Jericho then, for the next few weeks, berated the fans for supporting the lying, cheating Michaels, and putting him out of action was the right course of action to take. And at June's Night of Champions event, thanks to a returning Michaels, Jericho lost his Intercontinental Championship to a debuting on Raw Kofi Kingston, furthering the feud, which had a match for the two announced at the Great American Bash, with it being the first match that Michaels would be able to take part in since recovering, hopefully, from his eye surgery. And Lance Cade, though. Here's an interesting little twist into the works. He came through, of course he was a student of Michaels, who started accompanying Jericho to the ring, for a pretty good reason, informing his former teacher that he wouldn't want to be double-crossed by Shawn like he'd done to so many people in the past. He thought, I might as well sever ties with you before anything can happen to me as well. Now that is pretty damning evidence, isn't it? Now, the thing is, everybody, this match sounds big when I recite all that back, and it probably delivered big as well. Well, the thing is, it got over 3 stars, and you know what that means? I have to go into in-depth play-by-play detail. So, let's get right into it. The crowd are hot for HBK as both men stare down with the bell ringing. Now Jericho, he forearms the eye and then knees the ribs. Jericho is then in control until a counter runs him into a knife-edge chop. Shawn backs Jericho into a corner but holds his ribs after every single exchange. Shawn targets the leg and locks in a grapevine, which is broken via the ropes. He then corners Jericho and stomps the knee quite willingly and stretches it alongside the ropes, while the crowd will him on because they want to see Jericho take all the punishment they could for what happened to him. The referee stops Michaels from going at Jericho, which allows him to whip Michaels into the turnbuckle back first, followed by a springboard dropkick to the eye, with Jericho selling the knee beautifully. A double axe to the back on the outside is followed by a running kick to the ribs on the inside of the ring by Jericho, followed by a backdrop, shoulder thrust, and a surfboard stretch. Now, every move Jericho has done at this point has focused on the back and the ribs, with Michaels selling very well indeed. Now Michaels powers out of a submission, and then hits a punch, but is countered counted into an enziguri, with Jericho covering, but Michaels kicks out at 2. Jericho scoop slams his opponent, goes for a middle rope move, which Michaels counters into atomic rope drop, and atomic drop, followed by his forearm, which he then kips up, holding the ribs again. I have to keep stressing it. He goes for a back body drop, which Jericho counters into a Walls of Jericho. Hurts the back even more, of course, but Michaels grabs for the rope to break the hold. Now Jericho stomps the back furiously. The referee backs him off again. Jericho counters the sweet chin music into a forearm right back to the eye, backing Michaels into the turnbuckle with more and more forearms. Off a whip, Jericho goes for the one-handed bulldog, but runs into a very vicious clothesline from the Heartbreak Kid. Michaels goes up for the elbow drop, but Jericho drops Michaels nuts first onto the turnbuckle because he was too out of breath from his rib injury, or possibly couldn't see due to his eye injury, to walk up there quickly enough. That is pretty damn good stuff. I would say so. Nonetheless, Jericho again aims straight shots to the eye, steps up for a superplex, but Michaels fights out and pushes Y2J off the ropes. He lines up his elbow drop and it connects. He then lines up Sweet Chin Music, but here comes Lance Cade, out to distract him, but he of course eats a fist right to the face. Jericho goes for a code breaker up against the ropes, but Michaels counters it holding on and hits a jackknife cover for 2. Jericho rolls Michaels up again for 2. Jericho then goes for a running clothesline, but is launched over the top onto Lance Cade by Michaels. Michaels then goes to the top rope and he hits his humongous, rarely now seen, top rope moonsault to the outside onto both men. It's a pretty spectacular spot and I will never ever get sick of it. Michaels pulls Cade out of the way, but he's then elbowed right in the face by Jericho at the apron, and as a result, Michaels is bleeding from the eye quite badly, I would say. Now Jericho, off a whip, hits the knee to the face, and with a shocked look on his face, realises he has the opportunity to finish Michaels off, and nails him smack bang in the face with a very stiff punch. The referee looks at Michaels and tries to tell him to stop, but he wants to fight on, leading to Jericho to maul him and hit him with more punches to the injured eye. Michaels tries to battle back, he's got some energy in him, but again, Jericho's offense is just too much, and the amount of blood he's losing is actually getting quite significant. It's all over his torso, all over his face, it is all over the canvas. It is quite horrible. I wonder where that landed on the Muta scale. Nonetheless, Michaels goes to the ropes, and as Jericho is being held back by the referee, Cade lines up a kick straight in the face. It looks quite vicious. Jericho then mauls Michaels' face with a flurry of punches in a Luther's press position after Michaels pleaded with the referee not to stop the match. He wants to keep going. Jericho lines up some headbutts, taunting the bloody face of Michaels, who counters with a crossface. There is still some life in the Heartbreak Kid, but Jericho worked his way out of it very easily and dropped Michaels' head on the ropes, eye first. Good God almighty. Jericho is again then held back by the referee. The crowd are willing Michaels on. They want him to keep going. And Michaels wants to keep going as well. Jericho just again runs like an animal at that wound, pounding at it. Michaels again is just telling the referee, do not stop this match. Jericho repeats the same thing. Hey, he didn't say he wanted it to end. And he went right at him with another flurry of shots. Michaels, of course, in a very symbolic shot that, of course, would be replicated 2 years later, of course, climbing up the tights of his opponent. And the look that Shawn is giving Jericho and the pleasure on Jericho's face, he's thinking, yep, I've got you. And the commentators are stunned by the barbarism because it gets worse. Oh my God. It got worse. It got worse. 2 stiff boots to the face and Jericho is just rabid at this point. It is insane. And he's trying to will himself on. Up Jericho, but yeah, more stiff punches. Jericho then applies a sleeper hold and punches the wound more because he's a sick bastard. The referee then has no choice but to jump onto Jericho, scramble him and pull him off the bloody battered Heartbreak Kid and calls for the bell to end the match by technical knockout. Jericho won this match in 18 minutes and 18 seconds. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to point this out to you right now. That sounded pretty damn intense, but I need to step away from the match a minute to kind of explain something. You know, I mentioned earlier that there was one match in particular that transitioned this company to PG. This is the one. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why we don't have blood on show anymore outside of Brock Lesnar. Why, you may ask? I did a bit of research. Shawn wanted blood for this match, right? Vince allowed it, but it only was allowed in a very small amount, and Michaels, being the consummate professional he is, he cut too deep, and that of course meant the absolute bloodbath that you inevitably watched. And the colour image that is on screen right now that you can see shows the barbarism of it. And it really shows how horrible it actually looked. I remember looking back 8 years ago when I watched it live, I was horrified. So inevitably, looking back on it now, it's still quite stark. Now, this amount of blood spearheaded Vince through pressure from his sponsors, advertisers, and the USA Network to change the product's content to make it more easily sellable and viable. So, if you PG haters want to hate someone and blame on someone for the apparent decline in the product of yours that you love so much, you can blame the Heartbreak Kid for living up to his name in the fullest sense of the word for all of you, I would say some cases, large obsessed man children. Anyway, let's look at the match, because I don't want to talk about the politics of the wrestling business. I want to talk about this match that I've just spent trying to entice you all to rewatch. It was physical, intense, and barbaric in nature, relying on simple body psychology and a good use of aggression and blood to drive it along. The match shifted back and forth early on as both men tried to assert their position, with Jericho getting more offense as the wear and tear broke Michaels down, because of course Jericho is younger. I can say that for sure. It told a great story and went the ample amount of time to showcase it, with Lance Cade adding a bit of extra bite when he was needed but didn't overcomplicate. He didn't do too much, and I'm very happy with that because they could have easily overbooked it, allowing Jericho to look a lot stronger. The crowd were hot for Michaels throughout, but not giving Jericho the amount of heat I was expecting because he was a heel. People should have booed him, but I think a lot of people agreed. They agreed, and this New York smart crowd at times booed Michaels, which was very odd, considering 6 years prior he beat Triple H in that street fight and got all the adulation in the world. It shows how time changes, doesn't it? But nonetheless, the latter stages of the match saw them all stunned into silence, which helped with the story, but it drained the energy from the bout, making it feel like it was an agonising wait until the bell was called. The move variety gets minimal points off of Michaels' rarely used top rope moonsault and that awesome double axe handle atomic drop counter, but it rounds the match off just nicely for me. Now, this was a brutal and fun match for anyone who wants to see a match with story done right. It's a fine showcase of these two of the best in the industry doing what they do. It may not be a technical or physical masterpiece, but it does show that you don't need all those flips and kicks to pull off a good match, as the Triple H Kurt Angle match at the 2001 Royal Rumble shows. And actually, I would say Jericho versus Rock as well at the Rumble 02 that I reviewed last month. The fact is, you don't need to do a lot to make a match go far, and this proved it. But with very little going on in this match, they made a lot of it count for something, and I'll be happy to give this match 4 stars. It did need stronger crowd investment from both sides, and it needed to slow down the momentum shifting earlier on because it was a bit unrealistic to see both men fighting back so easily to counter all these issues it had, and honestly make it a better match than this. But for what this gave me, I was left very satisfied indeed, because a 4-star match from these two, I expected nothing less, and got a match that did its story very proud indeed. Especially when Jericho comes out later on in the evening to announce that Michaels has had his last ever match, to make him even more of a heel. Love it. The fact is, this was the best match of the night already. We're middle of the card, the best one has happened, so I bet you're all thinking what I'm thinking. It's downhill from here, isn't it? Well, we'll just have to find out, won't we? Next, we have a match that will crown ourselves the new WWE Divas Champion, with Michelle McCool facing off against Natalya to become the first in the history books. Now, since the original brand extension in 2002, SmackDown's Divas weren't able to fight for the Women's Championship, which was a Raw exclusive championship, and for those 6 years, the women on the blue brand, despite wrestling every other night, didn't have much purpose apart from being valets or eye candy, and honestly, with a large female roster coming through around this period of time, SmackDown General Manager Vicky Guerrero had an idea announcing the creation of the WWE Divas Championship and set up the Golden Dreams match, with the 2 women who grabbed stars from a pole would gain the right to fight in the ring for the championship at the Great American Bash. Now, Michelle McCool and Natalya were the 2 lucky women, beating off Maurice, Victoria, Kelly, Layla, and Cherry to the punch in there, setting this match in stone. And no, I just said beating off. Do not think in a very juvenile way, you listeners out there. I know some of you would. I'm going to call you out on it. Nonetheless, Michelle McCool subsequently defeated Natalya in a paltry 4 minutes and 39 seconds to win the title and become its first ever champion. Now, it's a match that crowns a new champion, yet didn't actually feel like it. It was a typical women's match of the time. The two did what they could in ring to stir some interest, but there just wasn't enough time to build on any of it. Both women showcased an aggressive submission moveset and provided their competence in ring, with the fluid pace to go with it, and many momentum shifts to highlight how equal they were, because a lot of people were thinking, really? Michelle McCool, has she really got what it takes to go up against Natalya? Oh, she showed it. The crowd were dead outside for the sharpshooter, because a smart crowd will always pop for the sharpshooter, and the occasional swift counter which impressed them. And while in my opinion the wrong woman won, it was enough of a match in the time for me to give it 1 star. I've got to say, I enjoyed it for what little it was. Making of that what you will, though, you may think this match was not much. But I say, for what it did, it was pretty solid. I'll give it that credit, but it could have been so much better if they gave it more time and more of a fleshed out story to it, really, and made it look more significant, because from that point on, this title didn't have that much significance, and this match could have made the title look a lot stronger if they just gave it the time it needed. Alas, it was not to be, and we move right on to the next match. And that next match, you ask? Well, it's for the World Heavyweight Championship from Raw, with the new champion CM Punk facing a sizable first pay-per-view opponent in Batista. Now, CM Punk and Batista were both drafted to Raw from ECW and SmackDown respectively, with the Animal losing a pre-draft arranged world title match to his SmackDown rival Edge at Night of Champions. Now, following that victory, Edge came to Raw specifically to taunt his pay-per-view opponent and say goodbye, knowing he'll never have to face Batista on SmackDown again, and he'll be the happiest person in the world. Well, the Animal took offense to this and hit him with a Batista bomb to settle the rivalry for good. This, however, opened up an opportunity for Punk to cash in his Money in the Bank contract and win the belt, thus bringing the title back to Raw in the process. Later on in that same evening, Punk retained the title in an already scheduled match with JBL, and the next week, Punk defeated Snitsky in another title defense, while Batista claimed the number 1 contendership after beating JBL, John Cena, and Kane in a fatal 4-way match. Punk again defied the odds to retain his title in another match by defeating Kane by countout, with the Big Red Monster not taking very kindly to this, attacking CM Punk, but before he could do so properly, Batista came in for the save, who in turn destroyed him with a chair, because honestly he would do, he wants to keep his competition at the pay-per-view fresh. Now, Punk extended his hand to the Animal as a sign of respect, but of course he didn't bother and hit him with a spinebuster afterwards, with Batista highlighting his aim of becoming the champion once again, and it was more apparent than you could think. While Punk obviously had to prove he had the ability to win at this fight, and show that he had what it took to take on one of WWE's biggest stars, and cement his place where many had doubted him as champion. Now, nevertheless, the match ended in a double DQ, as Kane came down and attacked both men after 11 minutes and 9 seconds of action, with Punk retaining the title, and Batista laid Punk out afterwards, implying his frustration with the lost opportunity. Now, this match could have gone on a lot better than it actually ended up being, primarily if Punk was actually able to showcase himself more. I will agree with the critics and reviewers at this time, because he was the world champion, and honestly, he was in this match being made to look very weak, despite being shown as capable in the weeks leading up to the show, beating sizable opponents. And honestly, he also wasn't involved in the finish either, which made him look even weaker. And honestly, this is one of the main quarrels, but there's a few more. The pace of this match was frustrating, as it was interesting in the multiple momentum shifts showing Batista and Punk well in their opposing styles and speeds, but it seemed to come very forced and very unnecessarily when Punk's offense was very minimal in contrast. The length of the match can also be criticized, as it didn't go on long enough to build to a satisfying conclusion, one of which was was horrible with Kane not really being needed. I did not need Kane to interfere here. What the hell are you doing? While I am critical of the speed of Batista's pace, the psychology of it was great, showing his dominance in a way that implied his desire to be champion again, while allowing Punk to give off the pissed off idea that, yeah, I won't lay down at all, with the slaps to the face and an enziguri counter working wonders. It was a David versus Goliath match in terms of fighting styles, size, and it was played quite wonderfully, despite the moronic finish. The crowd didn't really care. I mean, they were high for Punk, and they, just like Tommy Dreamer, were not showing any real care because Batista was in control, and it dragged the match down. They did not care at all for it. They expected Punk to lose. They were happy he didn't, but at the same time, they didn't like how it all played out. But the match, despite some moments, there was some good storytelling in here. There were some good parts to this. It didn't wow me. It didn't wow me or the crowd. It led to this title match feeling very flat, and it was a match that could have been so much better with a hotter crowd, a cleaner finish, more offense from Punk, just to make it more of an even contest, to make Punk not look weak. But alas, it was done, and I will give it credit for doing what it did, considering how critical I've been. But it should have been more. I'll give it 1.5 stars, but it's not bad. But seriously, considering it's Punk and Batista, who I actually both like, especially Punk's case, but I wished I could have seen a lot more from this match. WWE let us down with this one. Next, we have the New York parking lot brawl between long-time bitter rivals John Cena and JBL. Now, in a fatal 4-way elimination match for the championship at Backlash, JBL was the first eliminated from the match by Cena, locking in an STF. Now, JBL became fixated on making Cena pay for costing him a chance of becoming champion for the first time since 2005. He really wanted it, and it led to a match at Judgment Day, which Cena then won. The night after the pay-per-view, Raw general manager William Regal put Cena and Triple H against JBL and Randy Orton in a tag match, with the winners being able to pick a match type within which they would have a rematch at One Night Stand. Cena and Triple H obviously won because their faces, with Cena picking a first blood match. He wanted the wrestling god to suffer and bleed. Nice, with the leader of the C Nation winning on that bout as well. Now, JBL was not done with Cena, though. JBL ordered security to remove Cena from that prior mentioned world title match with the new champion CM Punk, because he believed it was easy picking to ensure he didn't interfere. And of course, those security personnel were JBL's own private personal security force, who laid Cena down for a hellacious beating. Now, however, that didn't put Cena down, as he came back with Crime Time in tow, whose distraction cost JBL the match. Lovely. The next week, the Gangland trio drove JBL's limo to the arena and then proceeded to destroy the limousine with pipes and crowbars, as well as spraying it with paint. Now, as a result, Cena told JBL, who was of course infuriated, that they could settle their score in my environment. The environment that, honestly, you're not going to survive in. A New York parking lot brawl. And as an act of revenge for defacing his limo, JBL assaulted Cena with a pipe outside of the arena and proceeded to ram a car into the prone Cena. And the question, of course, going in was whether Cena could actually make it to the pay-per-view in one piece, because he got hit head-on with a car, for God's sake. Nonetheless, he did, somehow against all logic, and fought quite a crazy and brutal match. However, it was JBL who got the winning pin. What? After throwing Cena onto a car windshield, after 15 minutes and 36 seconds of action. Now, this match was quite insane. I mean, you had forklifts, you had gasoline being poured onto cars and then lit, you had broken glass everywhere, and you had the electrocution of testicles with a car battery. That brings some flashbacks to one feud in particular. The fact is, these two showcased they were so angry at each other they wanted to kill one another, and that was showcased quite nicely. It was a fun thing to watch, actually, especially when you saw that John Cena not only needed to get ultra aggressive in a match, which I have not seen in modern day WWE for quite some time, but also he ended up losing the final match in a feud. He won the first two, and then the rival came out of it looking better. When has this happened? I don't know when it's happened since. While it was a fun watch, there was some creative spots in there and an unexpected finish, it was let down by its runtime, which went about 5 minutes too long for me, and its pace was too slow for multiple periods, and the lack of realism in that fire not really doing any harm to Cena at all, allowing him to hulk back up and try again, really didn't help this at all, along with the lack of major crowd noise, but that was to be expected, as this segment was pre-recorded earlier on in the day. Then again, the crowd did pop big once they actually came through and spilled into the arena. They got the props where required. This was a match that isn't obviously a technical masterpiece, but for what it symbolised as the end of one of the biggest and most bitter feuds of the last decade, it was a well and worthy one to add to their very violent collection. I mean, it's not as good as the Judgment Day I Quit match from 2005, but it is definitely one that I would say give it a watch if you're in for car crash television. Quite literally. It's a 2-star match. I feel for a hardcore brawling fight, it did a pretty good job at achieving this rating, because normally a lot of them don't. Because unless the story doesn't back itself up, those matches are pretty poor. 2 stars for a match that literally was just brawling and weapon shots? I'll take it. I will take that any day of the week, even if it was half pre-taped, but who cares? Let's get on to the main event, which is a match for the WWE Championship, which of course is now on SmackDown, with the incumbent champion Triple H facing off against Edge. Now, Edge was in a joyful mood coming into June the month before. He had Undertaker fired after one night stand, and had Batista got drafted to Raw, and then once that happened, he defeated him in Night of Champions. All seemed to be going well for the rated R superstar. He continued to assume his powerful role within SmackDown's La Familia stable thanks to his lustful relationship with general manager Vicky Guerrero. I don't want to ever say those words again, please kill me. However, as noted before, he lost the world title to CM Punk's Money in the Bank cash-in, which he then proceeded to blame Vicky for some bizarre reason, and cancelled their scheduled wedding. However, they announced their intentions to still get married as they resolved their past discretions. Their wedding went ahead on the go-home SmackDown. Yes, 2 nights before this show was due to come on air, they had the wedding spot itself in an overly hyperbolic showing of nauseating saccharin. It was awful. All seemed to be going well until Triple H, the WWE Champion, came out to spoil the party. Now, the game was the final draft pick won by Edge in the Brand vs. Brand Battle Royal on draft night, stunning the WWE landscape and seeing the company's main title return to the blue brand for the first time in 3 years. Now, Triple H then proceeded to do just like what he did with Stephanie and Test's wedding 9 years prior, prove why he is the absolute king of crashing weddings, by showing hidden camera footage of Edge and the wedding planner Alicia Fox passionately kissing and exchanging lustful words. Again, I do not want to have to say that again unless I'm writing a novel of some kind. Please stop me. Triple H laughed happily while Vicky proceeded to assault Edge, leaving this match coming in its wake. It sounds like pretty heavy stuff, doesn't it? Well, it defined the finish of this thing, with Triple H retaining his title off of a pedigree following an accidental spear to Vicky by Edge in 16 minutes and 45 seconds. Now, this main event honestly didn't feel like the big contest that the commentators JR and McFoley were hyping it up to be. Maybe it was the oversaturation of Edge and Vicky's nuptials on the broadcast, with all those votes leading towards a lack of fan apathy for the contest. However, when you take away a lack of real crowd atmosphere that came through in the opening 5 minutes, this match was actually pretty good. The psychology through body movement and selling was expertly done, which of course it's Triple H. He remained cool and composed while Edge was just frantic and attacking with an aggressive moveset. It played into how both men took the wedding fiasco in either way. Triple H's ribs and back were primed for a spear with most of Edge's offense, and both men countered each other's attacks so well that the contest was more evenly matched than I ever anticipated. The catfight between Fox and Guerrero that led to the finish, and the unintentional spear for the latter, was just the icing on the cake for the story from a match that built its feud and alignment dynamics greatly over the course of itself. It lasted a great amount of time, with the fast and steady pace that slowed down later on helping it, which thanks to some near falls and a catfight woke the crowd up and won them over gradually. It was a match that did all it needed to do, and while it did go on a little too long when you actually think about it, it remained too quick for the match's offense at times to build to it, but it was still pretty good. Outside of one clanger that Mick Foley made, and he had a horrible night on commentary, I am going to say this right now. He said that this was a match we've never been able to see because both men were on different brands. That is a moronic and benign statement, predominantly because Edge and Triple H were on the same brand for 3 years, from 2004 to 2007. Edge cashing in his second Money in the Bank on Taker was the reason that he switched in the first place. It only lasted a year. How stupid is that? And no wonder with calls like that I could see Mick Foley leaving the headset behind and going to TNA, because he didn't want to deal with it, understandably. Anyway, outside of that clanger, this match was actually pretty good. It was solid. It was respectable. It was 2.5 star worthy. That's what I'm going to give it. I would say give this one a watch if you want to see why Triple H and Edge are respected, because the subtlety of their movements and the psychology it brought was just so fun to watch. I just wish the crowd didn't take so long to give a damn, or we'd be in 3-star territory here. Oh well, I'll say this, at least the event ended on quite a good match. That is a very good thing that I'm very happy to say. Well, with that positive thought in mind, it's time for me to look back and reflect on my final thoughts of this show. Now, the Great American Bash 2008 was an event that I entered into for this show, this Friday Flashback show, really feeling apprehensive about, because I remembered the big matches on the night delivering 8 years ago, but I was worried that I didn't remember what the rest of the undercard was like, and inevitably, that forgetfulness wasn't done with any malice intent. I forgot about them because they weren't really that good. And this show was reeling from post-draft implications. This event had matches that made no sense story-wise, existing only to take titles back to other brands, and in the case of Batista, Triple H, CM Punk, Edge, they only really had the matches set themselves up because of circumstance and new draftees coming through. And especially in Triple H's case, if the match forming linchpin happens 2 nights before the whole show comes on, that's not good. That's lazy, in fact. That's actually not properly booked. That hasn't been thought out at all. Nonetheless, this event's big matches were solid enough affairs, and as one was expecting, one of them was fantastic in its execution. The rest of the card, bar one match, wasn't too bad, but it wasn't that good either, squandering in 1-star-ish mediocrity and weighing the card down, which when you have an apathetic crowd in a celebrated venue and city, combining with a really poor performance by almost all the commentators, it does not prove for a very good visual and audible experience. Because the thing is, the commentary teams were terrible. Adam Lee and Taz didn't add any spark of excitement despite Adam Lee's demeanour giving some class to what was pretty much a squash match. JR and Foley flopped miserably as they failed to gel, with Foley talking over JR all the time. Didn't allow him to really do anything. And sure, King and Cole were actually the best of the night, but they didn't have much excitement either. They felt like they were reading off scripts. They hadn't gelled well enough. And when you combine that, horrible commentary teams, with a poor crowd, it doesn't make a very interesting watch at all. But while I am happy that the big matches did what was required of them, the rest of this card and its outside elements with the commentary and the crowd make this a very difficult event to watch, making me think that the summer of 2008, while it got a lot of praise, didn't really look as good as I remember it being, you know? It didn't look as good as I thought it would be looking back. It was only the autumn post-SummerSlam where everyone got really interested and really into it. And with the quality of this show, it came across so loud and clear. The draft still hadn't had its effect off the show, and it ruined it, along with everything else in between. And as a result, I give the Great American Bash 2008 an okay but not great rating of 3.75 out of 10. It got some solid matches out of it, which is fine, but most of this card is pretty much a miss. They're solid, okay-ish matches, but nothing to really shout about. And it throws this event down into some poor territory below any semblance of mediocrity in my rating scale. Now, I would watch this if you're watching all the pay-per-views in order, but outside of the parking lot brawl, the main event, and Michaels Jericho, you'd be better off watching something else. Now, while I may seem and sound quite harsh, and much more harsh than this rating suggests, because this is nearly 4 stars, it's mostly because this event took multiple viewings for me to get through, and I just want to focus on the next event for September's Friday Flashback review, which, if you have no idea, based on what I announced in the Royal Rumble 2002 one, we have WrestleMania 18 to look forward to. Let's hope that that is better than this, despite what good it did eventually bring to its quite long and slightly rotting table. So there you have it, everybody. Friday Flashback review of Great American Bash 2008 is done. I hope you've all enjoyed this, because seriously, making this video is the biggest chore I've had since December to Dismember, and there have been pay-per-views that have done worse. Put that into perspective, ladies and gentlemen. That should say a lot. Mike, I hope we don't have any quarrels about this, because your rating and my rating are probably on completely different planets. Nonetheless, what did you all think about this pay-per-view? Do you remember it being as good as you remember it 8 years ago? Do you think my assumptions and criticisms are correct? Do you think I'm completely wrong and think I'm talking out of my arse and inevitably this is actually a pretty good show? Put your opinions down there in the comments section. I would be very, very happy to read them. I've been Freddie Thomas, you've been people listening. This has been the Friday Flashback review for the CC Network, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers!